Story number 1, Witness Transfer. I arrived at the safe house outside Billings at 1900 hours to facilitate a routine witness relocation handoff with my partner from the Denver field office. The structure was a single-story prefabricated unit set back from County Road 47, selected for its isolation and proximity to the interstate. I had worked 3 previous relocations with Agent Carver, and his record indicated punctuality and adherence to protocol. The protected witness, a 41-year-old male testifying in a federal racketeering case, was scheduled for transfer to a new identity packet and transport to secondary housing in Oregon. His cooperation had been consistent throughout the preparation phase, and his psychological evaluations showed no indicators of flight risk or destabilization. I conducted a perimeter check and confirmed the interior was secure before his arrival at 1845. Carver's vehicle appeared on the access road at 1858, within the acceptable window. I observed him park at the designated position and expected him to proceed with standard entry confirmation. Instead, he remained in his vehicle for 11 minutes past the agreed entry time, which violated standard 2-officer interior protocol. I made radio contact twice. Both times he confirmed he was preparing to enter, but did not provide justification for the delay. When he finally entered, he provided correct verbal authentication but failed to make eye contact and positioned himself with his back to interior doorways, contradicting his training profile. Carver had been a field agent for 9 years. His operational behavior was documented as methodical and situationally aware. The positioning he adopted left him exposed to the hallway and bathroom entrance, which made no tactical sense. The witness began exhibiting acute distress when my partner spoke, claiming the voice was wrong despite correct phrasing and cadence, and refused to proceed with fingerprint verification. He backed into the corner of the main room and asked me to confirm Carver's identity using the secondary authentication phrase. I did so. Carver responded correctly. The witness shook his head and said the words were right, but that something else was not. I attempted to de-escalate by separating the 2 parties, but the witness became unresponsive and began repeating coordinates that matched our current location to 4 decimal places. I had not provided him with GPS data. The coordinates were not included in any of his briefing materials. When I asked him how he knew them, he said he could hear them in the room, that they were being spoken underneath everything else. He asked me if I could hear it too. Carver did not react to this. He stood in the same position and told me to continue with the paperwork. His tone was even, but there was no acknowledgement of the deviation from procedure. I informed him that we needed to pause the transfer and contact the supervising office for guidance. He repeated that I should continue with the paperwork. My partner removed his service weapon without verbal justification and maintained aim on the witness while instructing me to complete the transfer paperwork as if protocol was being followed. The witness did not move. I asked Carver to holster his weapon and explain his reasoning. He did not answer. His breathing was regular. His hands were steady. He did not blink for 37 seconds, which I noted because I was attempting to assess whether he was experiencing a medical event. I made the decision to activate the duress signal embedded in my credentials, which triggered a tactical response team I had not been informed was staged nearby. The activation was silent and required no physical motion that would alert Carver. I continued to fill out the transfer documentation as instructed while waiting for response. The witness remained in the corner and had stopped speaking entirely. The response team entered and removed my partner without resistance. He did not speak again and was placed in administrative quarantine under a classification I was not briefed on. 4 officers came through the front and side entry points simultaneously. Carver lowered his weapon when instructed and allowed himself to be escorted to a transport vehicle that was not marked with any agency insignia. I was told to remain inside with the witness until a secondary team arrived. The witness asked me if Carver was coming back. I told him no. He asked if I was sure, and I confirmed that the situation was contained. He said he could still hear the coordinates and asked if that meant there was another one. I did not answer because I did not understand the question. A medical team arrived 40 minutes later and evaluated the witness on site. He was cooperative but continued to report auditory phenomena that were not present. I heard nothing abnormal. The medical team administered a sedative and prepared him for transport. I was instructed to surrender my sidearm, radio, and field documentation to a supervisor I had not met before. I was reassigned to document review pending psychological evaluation, and the witness was transferred to a non-disclosure medical facility with his case status changed to indefinitely postponed. I completed the evaluation 6 days later. The examiner asked whether I had noticed anything unusual about Agent Carver before the incident. I said that I had not, which was true. Everything unusual occurred after his arrival. I was informed that Carver had been removed from active duty and that no further information would be provided. The safe house was decommissioned. The witness's case file was transferred to a division I do not have clearance to access. My own report was filed under administrative closure with no action required. I have not been assigned another relocation since then. My current duties involve archive maintenance and interdepartmental communication review. The incident was reclassified as a psychological health matter and removed from my operational record. Story number 2. Water sample. I arrived at the Clarkson Municipal Water Treatment Plant at 8:30 in the morning to conduct a routine quarterly contamination screening following a minor uptick in dissolved solids reported by the facility manager. The drive had taken just under 2 hours from the regional office and the weather was overcast but dry. I signed in at the main office, collected my sampling kit from the vehicle, and proceeded to the primary treatment area with the plant's assistant operator, a man named Derek, who had worked there for 11 years. The initial samples from the primary settling tank showed expected particulate levels. I documented turbidity, pH, and chlorine residuals, all within normal parameters. Derek walked me through to the secondary filtration system, a series of SAM filters housed in a concrete chamber below the main building. The air was cool and damp, with the usual smell of chlorine and wet stone. It was there that I noticed the biological film coating the interior walls of the first filter housing. The film was thin, perhaps 2 millimeters at its thickest point, and had a texture somewhere between mucus and wet paper. It did not match any known bacterial or algal profile in our database. I have seen biofilms in treatment systems before, typically iron bacteria or manganese oxidizing colonies, but this was different. Under my flashlight, it had a faint iridescent quality, like oil on water, which I initially attributed to possible industrial runoff contamination. I collected scrapings with a sterile spatula and placed them in sample jars for laboratory analysis. Derek said he had not noticed the film during his rounds the previous day. I moved through the remaining filters and found similar growth, though less extensive, on the walls of filters 2 and 4. Filter 3 showed no film at all. I made notes on the distribution pattern and took photographs for the file. The whole process took approximately 35 minutes. I told Derek I would return after checking the outflow monitoring station to collect a second sample and compare growth rates. When I returned to the filtration chamber at 10:40, the film had spread. I am certain of this. The area I had scraped clean on filter 1 was covered again, and the growth now extended across approximately 60% more surface area than I had documented earlier. I checked my photographs to confirm I was not misremembering. The timestamps were clear. I took new photographs and collected additional samples, noting the rate of expansion in my field log. Derek was not with me this time. I called him down and asked if anyone had entered the chamber between my visits. He said no. The access log confirmed this. I asked if there had been any chemical additions or process changes in the past 24 hours. He said there had not. I examined the film more closely with a hand lens and saw that it had a fibrous substructure, almost like matted threads, and that it appeared to be exuding a clear fluid that beaded on the concrete. I contacted my supervisor, a woman named Brennan, to request authorization for a facility shutdown. She told me to complete the standard testing protocol first and submit findings before any operational changes could be approved. I explained the rate of growth I had observed. She said that biological films could appear to spread quickly due to water movement and changes in lighting, and that I should follow procedure. I said I understood and ended the call. During the third sampling at 11:15, the film had occluded the filter screens entirely. I could no longer see the sand media beneath it. The water passing through the filters had developed a viscosity that I can only describe as slightly thickened, like water with a small amount of cornstarch dissolved in it. It did not pour cleanly from my sample jar. I measured the viscosity as best I could with the equipment available and found it inconsistent with municipal water standards. I also noted that the temperature of the water in the filter chamber had increased by 3 degrees Celsius since my first reading. Derek came down again and stood in the doorway. He asked if we should shut it down. I told him I was waiting for authorization. He said the pressure readings in the distribution lines were climbing despite reduced flow, which did not make sense. I went upstairs with him to check the control panel. The readings showed elevated pressure across all outbound lines. He called dispatch and learned that 2 neighborhoods had called in complaints about water that would not drain properly from sinks and bathtubs. One caller said the water in her toilet bowl was moving on its own. I called Brennan again. She did not answer. I left a message outlining the situation and stating that I was proceeding with an emergency shutdown under my authority as the on-site inspector. Derek and I went back down to the filtration chamber. The film now covered all 4 filters completely and had begun to spread onto the floor. It glistened under the overhead lights. I could see it moving very slightly, a kind of slow, rippling motion. I made the decision to manually shut down the secondary filtration system without authorization. Derek closed the intake valves and activated the bypass line, which routed untreated water directly to the chlorination stage. This resulted in a temporary loss of treatment capacity for approximately 4,000 residents. I documented the time as 11:42. We sealed the filtration chamber and returned to the main office. I completed an incident report and submitted it through the emergency channel. A regional response team arrived 6 hours later. There were 5 of them, and they wore equipment I did not recognize. They removed all affected filtration equipment, cutting the housings free and sealing them in heavy plastic drums. They did not speak to me beyond confirming my name and assignment number. They worked through the night. By morning, the chamber had been stripped to bare concrete and hosed down with something that smelled like concentrated bleach and something else, sharper and more chemical. The facility manager was briefed separately. A cover story was implemented regarding corroded infrastructure and necessary emergency repairs. Residents were told to boil water for 72 hours as a precaution. I was instructed to complete my report using only the provided template and to include no observational details beyond what was explicitly requested. My report was classified under Maintenance Incident Protocols. I was reassigned to a different district the following month, a lateral move with no change in grade or salary. The Clarkson plant now operates on a modified treatment schedule that bypasses the secondary system entirely. I have not been back. The samples I collected were logged into the system, but I never received any laboratory results. When I inquired, I was told the samples had been destroyed due to contamination during transport. The file was closed 4 weeks after the incident. I was told it had been archived under standard infrastructure failure documentation and that no further action was required. Story number 3. Night Audit. I arrived at the surgical center at 9:30 in the morning for a routine unannounced inspection following an anonymous complaint about improper waste disposal. The facility was located in a commercial park off Route 53, a low brick building with tinted windows and minimal signage. I had conducted hundreds of these inspections over my 12 years with the State Health Department. Most resulted in minor citations and follow-up visits. The facility administrator met me in the lobby within 2 minutes of my arrival. His name was Dr. Reimer, and he was cooperative but visibly uncomfortable when I requested access to the surgical suites and recovery areas during active procedures. He explained that they had 4 cases scheduled that morning and asked if I could begin with the administrative offices instead. I declined. Unannounced inspections lose their value if the facility controls the sequence. He provided me with a surgical mask, shoe covers, and a visitor badge. We entered through the staff corridor. The building was climate controlled to the point of being cold, and the air had that particular sterile quality that comes from industrial filtration systems. Everything appeared clean and well maintained. The floors were polished. The equipment I saw in the hallways looked current. In operating room 3, I observed a standard appendectomy in progress. I stood in the observation area behind the glass. The surgical team maintained complete silence and moved with unusual synchronization, as if following choreography rather than medical necessity. There were no verbal cues, no requests for instruments, no confirmation of counts. The surgeon extended his hand and the scrub nurse placed the correct tool in his palm without looking up. They worked in a rhythm that seemed practiced beyond the point of efficiency. I made a note, but did not consider it a violation. Some teams developed that level of coordination. It was unusual, but not prohibited. When I requested the patient intake logs, the administrator provided files for 23 procedures performed over the previous 2 weeks. I cross-referenced them against the building's schematic posted in the main corridor. The layout showed only 18 recovery beds and 4 operating rooms. I asked Dr. Reimer to explain the discrepancy. He said some patients were discharged directly from the surgical suite and did not require recovery bed assignment. I asked for the discharge logs to verify. He said he would need to retrieve them from the records office. While I waited, I walked the main corridor to verify the posted evacuation routes. The building was larger than it appeared from the outside. Halfway down the north wing, I heard rhythmic mechanical sounds from a locked corridor marked equipment storage. The sound pattern did not match any standard medical device I recognized from my training. It was a low, repetitive pulse, almost hydraulic, but with a secondary clicking rhythm underneath. I stood outside the door for nearly a minute listening. When Dr. Reimer returned with the discharge logs, I asked him about the locked corridor. He said it was used for equipment storage and sterilization overflow. I pointed out that the sound I heard did not match that description. He said the facility used a specialized cleaning system for surgical instruments and that the machinery was proprietary. I informed him that I needed access to verify environmental compliance. The administrator refused access to that corridor, citing patient privacy. I clarified that equipment storage areas are not protected under patient privacy laws. He repeated that the area was restricted and that he would need to contact the facility's legal counsel before granting access. This violated inspection protocol and gave me grounds to override his authority. I informed him that refusal to allow access during a state inspection constituted obstruction and would result in an immediate operational suspension pending a full compliance review. He unlocked the door. Behind the locked door, I found 6 occupied recovery beds in a windowless room with no emergency exits. The patients were breathing in perfect unison, despite being under different anesthetic protocols according to the charts clipped to the foot of each bed. I checked the charts. Different surgeries, different anesthesiologists, different start times. But their chests rose and fell in exact synchronization, as if controlled by a single mechanism. The mechanical sound was louder inside the room. It came from behind a partition at the far end. I walked toward it. Dr. Audit. Reimer followed me but said nothing. Behind the partition was a piece of equipment I did not recognize. It resembled a ventilator array, but with additional components that did not correspond to any respiratory support system I had seen. There were 6 tubes running from the machine to the ceiling, where they disappeared into the ductwork. I asked what the device was. Dr. Reimer said it was a centralized monitoring system. I asked why it was connected to the ventilation system. He did not answer. I documented the violation, sealed the room with state inspection tape, and contacted my supervisor from the parking lot. I described what I had found. My supervisor asked if there were any immediate safety concerns. I said the patients appeared stable, but that the setup violated fire code, capacity regulations, and environmental safety standards. He instructed me to complete a standard report, citing only the fire code and capacity violations. I asked if I should include the equipment in the report. He said no. He said to file the structural non-compliance and return to the office. I wrote the report that afternoon. I listed the unauthorized recovery area, the lack of emergency exits, and the discrepancy in patient intake records. I did not mention the synchronized breathing or the unidentified equipment. I submitted the report through the normal channels. The facility was issued a 30-day conditional license suspension for structural non-compliance. All patient records from that wing were transferred to a federal medical archive I had never heard of before. I received a confirmation notice, but no access credentials. When I asked my supervisor about the archive designation, he told me the case had been referred to a specialized oversight body and that my involvement was concluded. My inspection report was reclassified 6 weeks later, and I was reassigned to desk audits for the remainder of that fiscal year without explanation. I did not return to field inspections until the following budget cycle. The surgical center reopened after 90 days with a revised license. I was not assigned to the follow-up inspection. According to the state database, the facility is currently in good standing. The anonymous complaint that initiated my visit was removed from the record system. I confirmed this when I searched for it during a routine audit last month. There is no reference file, no case number, no documentation that the complaint ever existed.